a very, very confusing game. There's a lot of different phases and rules going on that might yield your first viewing party of a rugby match very confusing, which is something that I would like to clarify for you to make sure that that becomes a bit easier. Now, who am I? I'm Niels Vian. I'm a magic judge, just like everybody here, but I'm also a rugby player. On the left is a recent picture of me returning to rugby after a 3-year break due to the events that I did. On the right, the blue arrow indicates my head in a position that is after I started playing rugby after a couple of months. My position, everything about that picture is horrible, and anyone that plays rugby would frown heavily on pretty much everything that I'm doing there. But still, that is me, age 28, and I improved quite quickly. 2 years after this picture, I was playing in 2nd National Division in Belgium. That's nothing crazy. Belgium's not a huge rugby country, but still. Now, the basics of rugby are pretty simple. You have 80 minutes to score more points than the opposing team by running forward, holding the ball, kicking the ball forward, and passing the ball backwards. Just to illustrate this, let's have a look at a video. So throws the ball backwards, kicks the ball forwards, grabs the ball and runs it forward. And apparently it's brilliant. And he scores. What the scoring is, we'll get back to that. So we saw throwing it backwards, kicking it forward, and running it forward to get to some sort of system that gives them points. Okay. Another important thing is there's different versions of rugby. You have versions that we just saw and that we're going to focus on, played with 15, called Union. There's a very rarely played version with 12. There's one with 11 called League. There's one with 7, which is the Olympic variant as well, and even 5, but that's beach rugby. It's almost a different sport at that point. They're playing on a rugby field, also called the pitch, which has very comparable dimensions to a football or a soccer field. So the playing area, that's the area in the middle here, between the two goal lines or try lines, can't be 100 meters. And the width can't be more than 70 meters. Note that all these measurements outside specify they cannot exceed a certain limit. That's because the sizes aren't actually set in stone. There is some variation possible there. For example, in Ghent, we have the largest rugby field in all of Belgium, which also means that we play differently. We play a lot more with passes and speed, where, for example, Charleroi, with the smallest field, tends to play more with power and short, aggressive phases. Let's see if I'm losing people here already. Learning is for dorks. I'm here to become a jock. Yada, yada, yada. Are people missing hugs that much? Oh, yeah. Rugby, very much the hug game. Belgium knows rugby. I think I might be the only one from the US. You don't have to jump through soccer hoops if you don't want to. Typical Charleroi. Yes, even in rugby, Charleroi are the thugs of Belgium. Actually, Charleroi is mono black, literally, in Belgium. But let's get back to it. We have a few important lines that will get referenced later on. The sideline is called the touch line. The goal line, also called the try line, and then there's some lines that are just denoted by how many meters they are from a certain place. The 22 meter line is the last 22 meters before you get to the goal line, and then the 10 meter line is 10 meters away from the halfway line. On the side, you have more of these dotted lines. One of them is 5 meters from the side. The other one is 15 meters from the side. This will get referenced later on. Don't worry too much about it just yet. Then, how to score points. We already saw in that little clip earlier that somebody scored points, but how many points? What did it mean? This is not just like a goal worth being 1 point. What we saw was a try, which gives 5 points. To score a try, to get those 5 points, you need to bring the ball into the opposition's try zone or the in-goal area and push it onto the floor with your own power. So you need to put downward pressure on a ball that you have control over. So let's have another look at a try. One with looks slightly different than the one we already saw before. This is a great sprint down the line. For those of you curious, we're looking at an oldies match. So all these players are over 40 years old and former high-level players. Let's have a look at another one. Dashes through, nobody touches this guy. It's like, okay, go all the way. Finds the end, dives and pushes it at his own strength down onto the floor. And it just keeps going, but let's not get into it too much. A very big and important distinction to a bunch of other sports, American football being the most relevant one, is you have to push that ball down. Just ending up in the goal area with the ball is not enough.
He scores. In goes Chris Wiles to Marco.
So you see here, he's in the goal. Yes. Oh, no, he lost control over the ball and it doesn't count. This is a... There we go. He's there, he's there. Ah, unfortunate. So, very important, you have to be able to push that ball down on your own. If you lose it forward or you don't have control anymore, you don't actually get any points. Now, after you've scored those 5 points, your team gets a free kick. The free kick needs to go through the goalpost. So in addition to that line that we saw, there's also 2 goalposts and a bottom goal bar. Again, much like American football, they have the Y-shaped one. In rugby, it's usually 2 big goalposts. That kick is taken from the same position where the try was scored, but of course further back. So let's have a look at a rugby kicker taking a conversion. So this is without pressure, visualizes the goal. This is a very far kick and nails it perfectly. Now, a funny thing about these... Oh, let's go back. No, go back. A funny thing about this is much like in Magic, where we used to have 3 minutes of sideboarding time, for example. That moment where the players get to prepare and focus on the kick also has a fixed time. And this has caused a lot of these specialized kickers to super focus on that kick and develop a ritual, and you'll see that repeated with some people. So let's look at one of these players' rituals. Of course, I try to pick one that's a bit more interesting.
4 penalties in the game have all gone to the Dragons. Parramatta without a penalty.
The only thing I can say in their defence, out of all the goal kickers, this fella has the most entertaining run-up. So at least...
So he places his ball,
and he taps the shoes on the ground,
make sure his shoes are clear,
little catwalk, and now he'll poke out the chest,
visualizes the kick, and it's clear, like the commenters already know what's going on.
Stance, doink, straight through the post.
Yeah. So there's Dan Bigger, Thomas referenced to, and the player that we saw throwing the ball out of his hands while he was trying to do the try. Lost his name for a second here. The English captain also is quite famous for the look he has on his face. Now this kick sometimes becomes more difficult when there's certain weather conditions. So weird stuff happens during these kicks from time to time. So we see here, goes through and comes back. This was a pretty extreme example. Usually it's the sideways motion that is the problem with these kinds of free kicks. What is also possible is a drop goal. A drop goal is literally what it sounds like. A player drops the ball on the ground and then kicks it. What was the ruling here? This was still a score, as Thomas Ralph said. It was pretty heavily discussed within the rugby world even. So player drops the ball and kicks it after it hits the floor. With the floor, not the four. And again, you need to go into the goalposts. Very nice. We see him just in open play with defense around it, and we'll see a slow motion, ball on the floor, and then there's contact with the foot. And again, passes to the kicker, and the kicker just finds goal from there. We get the slow motion, but the stupid sign is in the way to show the ball is dropped, and then it comes through. Feel like a cat watching a washing machine, don't understand nothing, but it's soothing. That's kind of what I want to achieve, is just that you understand sort of what's going on, not necessarily that everything makes sense. And then last, you also have a penalty kick, which you get if your opponent made a mistake, and it's just the same as a conversion kick pretty much, but you get 3 points for it. Feels like a cat until you get into the washing machine, then it is like being on the rugby field. Yes, that is exactly what it's like. Now, a very big part of rugby, or most versions of rugby, is the contact and the tackle. Because up to now, we've seen people just running the ball forward and then kicking it forward. But of course, the opposing team gets to try and stop you from doing that. So you're allowed to stop only the ball carrier. You're not allowed to push or grab anyone who has the ball by making contact only using your arms, and use your arms in a wrapping fashion below the collarbone. Anytime you fail to do any of the bolded parts of that sentence, there's going to be a bit of a problem. So let's have a look at textbook frontal tackle. Shoulder goes in, arms go around, under the collarbone. We'll see it in slow motion. Bonk. This is a textbook near perfect tackle. Going in lower and stronger than your opponent. Trying to put pressure where he's holding the ball. What? We see another. Let's see if we get another slow-mo replay of that. Some deep breaths. But nice hug. So cozy. Clearly there's no COVID involved in these. Now, these are the frontal tackles. Usually, as a player, you see those coming. Once it's a chasing tackle and you're tackling from behind, things start to look a little bit different. So the hug from behind, that's just grabbing on, holding on, and making sure that they trip. The ankle tap is when you can't grab them and you literally dive for the ankle, and you do what every high schooler and mid-schooler does, making them trip. And there's some examples from the pro level. So intercepts the ball, has a lot of space to run. But we have somebody who is running faster than our ball carrier and turns into a bit of a backpack for him. So, important, as soon as you are no longer supporting yourself on your 2 feet and nothing else, you have to release that ball. Blah, 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 stuff is happening. No helmets make me go... that's why the rules are the way they are for what is a legal tackle and what is not. There's no... All the suicidal tackles that you see in American football, they're very much illegal in rugby. So what is the result of a tackle? Usually the result of a tackle, you're not allowed to jump with the ball in hands. No. And that rule is enforced. Yeah. The rule for legal tackling is very, very heavily enforced. There's a lot of attention to player safety in rugby, and increasingly so, and for good reasons. So, after a tackle, a ruck, that's an important one, is formed when at least one player from each team are in contact, which just means holding each other on their feet and over the ball. Usually what this means is that the person who did the tackle gets pushed away by a helper from the team that was tackled. Let's have a quick...
In rugby, rucking is one of the key aspects of the game in retaining possession. From the flow on of what we've just seen, we're going to give you another example of a tackled ball situation where both the defending and the attacking team needs to ruck.
So here we're going to have, I could show this in a match, but it's easier to have a set up situation like this one. So we're going to show you what happens if there's more people on one side, the attacking side or the defending side.
Example now, we're going to have our attacking team take the ball up into a defensive situation we've just shown. Todd takes...
So what we see, the attacker, he has 2 people in his backup and he's running into less people than that. There's only 1 defending and his helper comes in to make sure that they can't get to the ball. At this point, it's already turned into a ruck because we have 2 people, the grey one and the white one, still standing on their own feet and over that ball in the middle.
First man in immediately has to clear that guy out that's over the top. So as a case we've just said... So,
well, let's fast forward a little bit to the second scenario. Now there's more defenders than there's attackers. So what we see is these 2, this guy did the original tackle, this one is trying to get the ball, and these 2 are trying to help their mate. Oh.
Over the ball.
But this time they get pushed off and the extra guy can get the ball because it's free. So this situation, let's go back a little bit and go for the tackle. So a ruck is formed. Very important now is at this point, this group of people become an entity on the field. You're only allowed to join that group perpendicular to the lines on the field, and you're not allowed to go around it. There's offside lines. This is a bit technical. Just know that you're not allowed to run up next to it, and you can only join it straight in. Yeah, so in a ruck there's offside lines. I'm not going to get too technical. There will be more than enough rucks for you to look at when that happens. Now that's assuming that the player that gets tackled goes down on the floor. They can also stay up. In that case, usually what you get is a maul. A maul occurs when the ball carrier is on their feet and is held by 1 or more opponents and 1 or more of his teammates. At that point, the ball must stay off the ground. How does that look? Gets the ball, gets tackled, but he can't go to the floor. And from both sides, team members keep adding in. And at that point, we keep going. A maul can only end in 2 ways. Either the player that had the ball originally can take it out again and start playing with it again, or it falls over. Those are the only 2 ways these can end. And they're usually, if the ball is in the middle like that, is a way to lose the ball. The other thing that can happen as the result of a tackle is that the ball is just tossed in the open. Let's have a look. Yeah, Thomas is already helping out with penalties for dangerous play. Watch the football player kick quarterbacks in the head. Yeah, that's not going to happen. You're not even allowed to kick people in rugby. This makes cricket look like tic-tac-toe. Yes, there's quite some more things happening in rugby. Then, set pieces in rugby. These are planned out starts or restarts to the game that happen either at the beginning of a game, after a penalty has been made, or when the ball leaves the playing area. The first one is the most easy one, is the kickoff, which happens at the beginning of a match and after every time points are scored. One team kicks the ball into the half of the other team, who most likely will catch it and then run up and start the game. So let's have a look at what that looks like. So here we see one team is on the halfway line. Their kicker is in the middle and will either kick the ball usually to this area or to this area, high enough so they have time to run in and contest the ball there. Dan Carter is left-footed. Why is this here? This is because it's part of a longer video that explains that different kickers will have different focus areas. Dan Carter is or was known as a more long-range kicker, so we see that technically he could kick anywhere behind this 10-meter line, but nobody expects Dan Carter to do this, and you see that they're actually grouped up in the areas where Dan Carter usually does a kick. Him being left-footed means it's more likely for the ball to end up here. And we see how deep and how far he goes. We also saw here that player being lifted up, but he was being lifted up, which is something that you are allowed to do, and then you're not allowed to play on the man in the air. It's small technical thing that doesn't really impact game that much if you're watching for the first time. Just know it's legal to pick up somebody to grab the ball, and these people trying to get to the ball are not allowed to touch him until he touches the floor. So that's the kickoff. It's literally just a kick in the air and you catch the ball. Carter left-footed, that's not Eldritch code. So, kicking skill, team layout, and trickery is possible. You can, by distributing your running up players, you can signal where you are going to kick and actually put some strategy in this piece already. The line out restarts the game when the ball or ball carrier with the ball goes into touch. That's over the sidelines. You make a tunnel. The offensive team, the ones that didn't lose the ball, gets to choose how many people are in there, and then the defensive one matches it.
The lineout is a parallel formation between the 5-meter and 15-meter line by the forwards of the two teams, in which the forwards of the attacking team has a code to where they are going to jump, and for the hooker who is standing in touch to throw the ball in the middle and find his jumper.
There we go. That's super the basics. There's two lines. One of the two teams get to throw in. They have to throw it in the middle and give both teams a chance. Of course, your team will know where you're going to throw and the other teams won't. There's a lot of weird stuff that can happen here as well. Where usually they'll throw the ball, but this is a set piece. So this is the only time in a rugby match where you know where everybody is going to be and going to be running. So let's have a look at another line out, maybe one that is better video quality. There we go. So all the way to the back, throws it back to the one that just threw, and he dives through because they know if they're going all the way to the back, there's going to be a gap in the middle. Lots of fun stuff happens in line out. So And then another one, super important one, is the scrum. It restarts the game when a penalty occurs. That should result in a situation where either team could get control over the ball. Is a very brief description of this. Lineouts happen in the side. Scrum happens inside the playing area. So let's have a look at a super stable and very basic scrum. We have a very close up of a lot of butts right now. There we go. We have 2 formation of 8 players. One of them, number 9s, throw in the ball, and then they try to push until the ball ends up under the feet of one half and they can actually get the ball. This is rugby at its finest. This is one of the most iconic parts of what rugby looks like. So what we saw now is what happens if both teams are equally strong. This is what happens if one team is significantly stronger than the other. Then it becomes a very painful endeavor. Being in this pile on the receiving end is just about the worst thing that can happen to you. And as long as that ball stays in that group, they get to go on. See, the ball came out, so now they have to move. Another showdown between Wales and South Africa. And again, they keep the ball in. As long as it's in, that formation has to be maintained. So, in rugby, there's a lot of specialist roles. We have already seen that kicker, that's the number 10, usually is the one that's specialized in kicking. The scrum that you just saw, that is 8 people, as in this formation, that have specifically trained to do that. The lineout is also composed usually of these 8 people. The rest of the people, 9 until 15, are specialized in long-range passes and sprinting. This is very simplified. These 8 are called the forwards. They are the working horses of your team. 9 to 15 are the backs. They are the finishers, the scoring machine of your team. I could spend an entire seminar only talking about these 15 different roles and what they mean and what they do. Just know that the numbers on their backs mean something, and they'll all have a role. Now
we are at 10 to 5. So if you have something that you still want to show, do it very quickly, and then we'll move on to the next seminar.
All right, it's very brief. So game is continuous, as was already said. There are no breaks unless a set piece needs to happen, or rarely for injuries. Yeah, that's something else that I want to talk about. And I had a section about common infraction and penalties, but I'm going to drop that for time, because I'm guessing there's going to be a pretty big overlap with what Thomas would be doing otherwise, and it's not so interesting. I'll answer a last question. What position do you play as? My first match, I was a loose head prop. It's generally considered one of the stronger high pressure, like physical pressure points. It's the one in front of the scrum, taking the pressure on the other side. I moved to tight head, which is even worse than loose head, and then moved to 5 in the end, and then back to tight head when I came back to rugby. So I've always been the workhorse, the part of a rugby pitch. That is all the time I had. I'm looking forward to seeing what Thomas will be talking about. If you have any questions about rugby, or if you ever want to watch a rugby match together with me and I can give you pointers and explanations about what happens, I've done that with Anouk, and she's now very capable of watching rugby. That is all.
All right. Thank you, Niels. We can move down to the next seminar. If you, by the way, have further slides, feel free to post them so that people can take a look later.
Yep, will do.